on a podcast between Annie Petrell and John Everett. So I'd like to introduce Annie first of all. Annie Petrell, she is a professional coach. She's a founder of the Serious Sofa. She is CTI accredited, and most important of all, she's a lecturer at the Unknown University of Applied Sciences. Hello there, Annie. How are you?
Hello. I'm good. I'm excited. I'm excited to be sitting here chatting to you, actually. So, well, thanks for having me.
So it's good to have you here, Annie. It's really good. So today, well, we were talking a little bit some time ago, a really, really great topic about the relevance of self-awareness, but not only in ourselves, but in the younger generations. And that's what we're going to get into today. I'll get that two out in a minute.
Two today.
Yeah. So what do you think? What would you like to first share, Annie, around your first observations on the younger generation and self-awareness and the relevance of that?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think the last, 3-4 months have been amazing for me as a new discovery, and I always love to learn, and there's been a big learning curve going on in the last few months. And interestingly, the first thing I discovered about adults, young adults, is that, they are actually hugely self-aware. There is, for them, many of them have explored this world. And if we go back to when we were young, that probably wasn't the same story. And they come in as people who have explored maybe yoga, meditation, mindfulness, reading Buddhism. So I was actually, wow, this was like an eye-opener for me. Because we hear that, so many assumptions about the younger generation. I don't know, stories I'm not even going to go into. But what I saw was that many of them are applying self-awareness in some way or another. And whether that's to manage ADHD or whether that's just to manage some stress. So that was an interesting find for me. And I also discovered that there is an openness and a willingness to learn. That was a really refreshing, discovery. There's an openness and willingness. But I think the challenge is that their reference point of where they're learning from is actually creating a kind of negative aspect of how they're learning self-awareness. And I'm talking about social media.
Okay.
And TikTok and the impact, and I guess also the way self-awareness is coming across on those channels. And it sort of manifests itself really as perfect practice rather than take some time to sit with yourself and just be. So the perfect practice, or the 10 minutes, half an hour, the ways of being and doing, have been greatly influencing the younger generation to the point where what I would consider self-awareness is a personal and private practice to get to know yourself, has then become accompanied by, if you're not doing it properly, then don't do it kind of scenario.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. So how do you see that? I mean, if we're looking at, perceptions, because we talk a lot about perceptions in what we do. So how do you see students' perceptions differing from your perceptions? How do you see that?
I think I felt, so I kind of, in my trip classes, and I also I'm doing walking coaching in those situations. What you see is people say, I'm used to this world, I'm insightful, I do this and this, and then suddenly people are saying, yeah, I know myself, but I don't really know myself today, and it's really bothering me, and I need to understand myself better, and I'm trying to do it all, and the energy that was coming out is like, whoa, how are you right now? That's my question to them. How are you right now? And it became a challenge that they don't quite know how they are right now. And they've tried really hard to find themselves. And then I asked the question, I said, I'm just sensing that there's a bit of perfectionism in you. And they
Yeah.
were like, yes, yes. And I said, I'm sensing that mindfulness is maybe one of those other things you're doing that you feel you should do perfectly.
Yeah.
And the impact of that is that it makes them feel worse. They ask themselves questions like, am I meditating properly? Or am I understanding myself well enough? Or did I do this mindfulness practice well enough? Or why can't I feel? Or why can't I sit quietly? It
Yeah.
becomes almost the pressure. It becomes, yeah, a sort of pressure rather than a source of peace, you know?
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
pressure rather than peace for me was like, whoa. And I came back, actually spoke to my husband, because it was this very quickly, this awareness. And I was actually quite surprised, to put it mildly, maybe even shocked, that
Yeah.
these amazing people are using something that should help them in a positive way. But
Yeah.
because of the references of where it's come from, like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and their mindset,
Yeah.
it's becoming detrimental to them, because it's becoming yet another thing, and
Yeah.
therefore it's not helping them. And yeah, I felt quite disturbed by that, actually, because I thought, wow, they're so
Yeah.
vulnerable already in so many ways,
Yeah.
that these techniques to help them aren't actually helping them.
So we're actually
That was,
throwing down to them, like this perfect image. So, their perspective has to be perfect.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So everything that they're looking at, is, they're setting the highest bar for themselves.
absolutely.
Wow.
Perfectionism. And I guess in the college I'm at, because it's about entrepreneurship, with
Yeah.
brilliant people, really brilliant and inspiring individuals. Naturally, as an entrepreneur, you have certain traits, don't you? Drive, passion, resilience, and perfectionism is there. And they're all quite hardcore traits in the sense, going down this road of getting things, goals, and ambition.
So that's
So
kind
they
of,
have,
yeah,
sorry, yeah.
sorry, no, 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 carry on, carry on.
No, I was going to say they have a tendency to actually be very focused. And as a consequence to that, they aren't able to open up, their minds aren't able to stop, or, and there's a rise in perfectionism, a huge rise, also with social media, also with TikTok, etc. If you look there, everybody's pitch perfect, aren't they? Picture perfect.
Yeah.
And the impact of that on individuals who are maybe even struggling, not in the university, everywhere, has been really detrimental. So that combination of drive, ambition, resilience, go-getting, and then
Yeah.
perfectionism, that's actually can be quite a challenging mix of ingredients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you feel that that's, social media, the technology is having an impact there, on how they perceive themselves.
I've read a lot actually about it, because I was hugely curious, and they talk a lot about it too. So one of my first lessons, I did ask them what gives them energy, what takes,
Yeah.
and everybody said scrolling on the phone, looking at stuff. That was just the generic, and that's not a surprise to either you or I. On top of that, we talked about perfectionism. I shared a podcast with them from this lady, and she herself is a perfectionist, and she does podcasts, and one of them was about her perfectionism, and it resonated with quite some people in the class. So that was why I
Yeah.
shared it, actually. Um,
Yeah.
I wanted
Oh,
to touch, John, on the idea of saboteurs a little bit for them.
okay. Yeah.
And I thought that was probably a really useful saboteur just to bring into the picture without getting too heavy on
Could
saboteurs.
you could you explain what that is a little bit? Some people out
Yeah,
there will be looking at the podcast and going, yeah, what's a saboteur?
yeah. It's so saboteurs, or inner critics, chattering monkeys, negative stories, all of those terms. So when we're thinking negative things about ourselves
Yeah.
and creating awareness about those negative stories, it's those negative stories we tell ourselves, that we name. in coaching and, as our saboteurs, and getting to know your saboteurs or your inner critics. That is about sort of taking them out of you and making yourself an observer of that, of that negative, message, that negative story.
Yeah.
And so that when you hear it, you realize, actually, that's not me saying it. It's my saboteur, my inner critic, my perfectionism, or my pleaser, or my judge. So there's a whole world of negative characters that tell us things, I would say.
So you're saying it's actually not a part of us. It's like separate. It's kind of part of us, but it's separate from us. Is that it?
Yeah. So the way we can manage it is to separate ourselves from it. That's the point. It's in essence, it's coming from our head. And whilst it stays in our brain, it feels like we are telling ourselves that. So I guess it's a tool to say, okay, imagine when I'm telling myself, am I doing this meditation practice well enough? Or you're not doing this meditation practice well enough, or you're no good at sitting still. That's quite judgmental. So we're judging ourselves. And if we imagine that voice has a face, I have one. We all have one. I'll share mine. That's a good one. My judge is Matilda, the film Matilda. Her head mistress. Yeah,
Hello,
her head
Matilda.
mistress. Yeah, Matilda's head mistress. So she's the one with the hairy chin, and she's quite formidable lady. So I see her coming in when I'm telling myself, you're useless, you're not going to make it, Then her head appears to me. And then I'm looking at her and going, okay, maybe there's some truth in that, maybe there's not, but actually I can decide. I can make my own choice. So it helps to actually put a face to a name. So when we have a negative story in our head, it's actually really, really, really important to think, what is that negative story? What is that I'm telling myself, maybe then? And then noticing. And if it is, you're no good at this, or they're all better than you, thinking, okay, how much of that is true? Is there 1% true? And what does that person look like who's telling me that? So you really have this visualizing process.
We've actually got a question here from one of the audience. What's the one thing that I can do to identify my inner voice?
One thing you can do, and it starts, this is the point I think I would come to, it starts with taking a little bit more time every day to notice yourself. So it starts from getting a little bit deeper in connection with yourself, and that can be 1, 2, 3 minutes a day, just being a bit of an observer of you. Building that relationship with yourself also makes you aware of the things you tell yourself. So imagine that person who's asking is got a project for work, and he's part of a team, or she's part of a team, and they feel that it's a bit too difficult or overwhelming, but maybe they don't ask for help, or and they will tell themselves, yeah, you should know this, you should know this, you're better than you what are you doing? You're messing around. What are you doing? You're not showing up for people. And once you recognize you're telling yourself those stories, even writing them down on a piece of paper, and to see what you with your old pen, which is my favorite tool in the whole world, pen and paper. Write down, you should know better, you're useless, what are you doing? You call yourself a team person, write them down. And once you write them down, you are taking them out of you and becoming the observer. Write them down.
Okay. So write them down is the
and then go, what is this? I know better. I am working through this. You can have then a discussion with these words or this person. You can make a choice. But get them out of you in whatever way is useful. Writing them down is super useful.
Writing it down and then questioning the truth. It is true. Are there any facts?
That's it. But it starts with going back before. You only notice if you just slow down a little bit. And I'm talking little bit slowing down, slowing down. I'm not talking lying down, but just slowing down to have reflection moments throughout the day. That's
Okay. Oh, that's right. I'm going to try that myself. You know, as I got my little voice going away.
yeah, we all
Jonah.
have them. Oh, yours is called Jonah.
Yeah, John. John is the good bit. Jonah is the terrible little voice.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so move us then on the self-awareness in action. So I've got a couple of questions, there I'd like to ask you. So what are some practical strategies for teaching students self-awareness?
It's interesting because for me it was a voyage of discovery. It really was a voyage of discovery. And in the end, I decided I could only do it in my way. And
Yeah.
so this is my version of what I
Yeah.
discovered. And I work through the fundamental parts that we do when we're learning to be a coach. So,
Yeah.
but the first thing I did actually was, and I took a gamble here, I got the whole class of 18 students to literally stop and just sit with themselves
Yeah.
for like 2 minutes. And first of all, I got them to orientate themselves in the space and, start to feel your feet. Because actually, when did you last feel your feet? When do we feel our feet? When do we say hello? I'm a big fan of saying hello to my feet every day when I'm walking my dog. So when do you last create awareness of your body?
Yeah.
And I got them to sit there. First of all, of course, there's a bit of giggling, of course, because they're like young.
Never done it.
Never done it. Well, some had. Even if they had, it was like, whoa, we're all together, and is this normal? And they're all international students, so they're different cultures.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was a bit like, is this going to work? you know. But then I got them to ask I asked a question, and this is a new training. I'm training to be a somatic coach as well with
Okay.
the London School of Somatics, and this was
Yeah.
a brilliant question that I love. And the question is, what can you do less of right now? What can you do
Oh,
less of right now?
powerful.
It's really nice. And initially, there was this kind of like, we're already stopped. How can we do less?
Yeah.
But imagine, I'm really aware that I hold my jaw, so maybe I could do less of holding my jaw so tightly.
Yeah.
Maybe I could do less of sitting up so straight. I could let myself just go, oh, let go, flop my arms down.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I could do less of holding tension in my neck. Maybe I could do less of not breathing well, you know. And it's almost like even though we stop, there is 1,000 other layers we can find
Yeah.
in our bodies to say, what can I do less of right now?
Yeah.
And that question was awesome. It changed the whole energy in the room, and suddenly everything
Oh,
was
wow.
brilliant. Yeah,
Wow.
it was really good. So that's one thing I did with them. And from that space, we talked about, the values, the strengths over a whole module. So what I wanted them to be able to do, if I put it in the simple terms, was to be able to, at the end of the module, be able to say, this is me, this is what I'm good at, this is who
Yeah.
I am, and this is what I stand for. When
Yeah.
I finished Coactive, our first training course where we met, I came home to my husband and said, if I could share at least, I don't know, 10% of what I've learned with young adults, that would make me super happy.
Yeah.
And, to be able, I remember the exercise we had when we had to go, I am.
Yeah.
That was so painful for me. I am creative. I am inspirational. I say it now because I absolutely believe it, but it's
Yeah.
taken me a rather long time to, I'm not going to give my age away, but
Well,
it's taken me a rather long time.
you said something really important there around values. Yeah. That kind of segues a nice question. How can self-awareness empower young people to navigate the complexities of life, make choices aligned to their values? Nice question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, interestingly, we had a discussion, of course, about this in the class, and one of the biggest kind of realizations for the students is they're entrepreneurs, so they're setting up a business.
Yeah.
Is they can even choose to align their business around their values, which was like an eye opener for many. Not only the way they interact with others, but they can even choose for their business. And knowing your values, and one of mine is to be inspired and inspire. And I think that's why I've so enjoyed this college thing, because it's hit me on both fronts. I did inspiration and I was inspired. That's just like given me, I feel like I've had a vitamin pill with so much inspiration. It's been brilliant. So I notice when that's not there. I notice when I'm not being inspired, or when I don't have joy in me. I notice that. So what I'm saying is we all have values. We all have things that really irritate us. I hate people who don't queue. That really bothers me. But that could be because I'm really English. But it could be because I think, respect, or what is bothering me there, and why is it irritating me? And what it is actually, I find it disrespectful to those other people who have been there waiting patiently, and you honor them as well. So we all actually act on our values day in, day out, but the consciousness of them isn't there. And creating that consciousness is key.
That's the key thing, the consciousness. I mean, that's that resonates with me. Being consciously aware of what are them values. Now, so we've got another question coming from the audience here on that. So someone's asking us, how do I find a value?
Yeah, there's lots of quite nice ways of finding a value. First of all, you could even say, what's made you happy today? Just have a think about, since you got up this morning, what made you happy today? And it could be that somebody opened the door for you. That could be something that happened. Of course, opening the door for someone is not a value, but that value that hit was being seen, maybe. I have a value of being seen, or a value of acknowledgement, or a value of respect. So there are moments, and there could be something that's absolutely irritated you. That somebody closed the door in your face, the opposite.
The opposite. And then so something
and the
you
opposite
hate.
often something you hate, and that's where we often find our values, because there's more emotion connected, often immediate emotion, when you really don't like something. So you can also do a visualization, or just sit with yourself and think, oh my gosh, when what was that time when I had that brilliant conversation with that friend, and and where were we, and what was going on, or what was that moment that I couldn't stop laughing, or and I just felt this amazing joy in my body, and what did that give me? And so there is moments, cherished moments throughout our lives that have triggered emotional states, and when we sit with them, and even mind map it, and really think, what are the words that are coming out here that I really connect with on paper, even just looking at them going, wow, that's so important to me. And then what, it's also becoming aware again of yourself, and say, if you have a value of inspiration, for example, like myself, where does that show up in my day? So when am I being inspired or inspiring? Am I living that value? Am I really alive with that value? Respect. Am I connected with that value, respect? Is it really who I am? So you can actually do a kind of, imagine you're an anthropologist, really start really getting curious, like David Attenborough style, when he watches all the animals and the way they move and how they interact. Start watching yourself a little more deeply, and really connect with just those moments throughout the day that trigger some reaction, emotional quality, and whether that's negative or positive, going, what is it about that? Judgment is really a value many of us, or non-judgmental is a value many of us have. And we often find that from the negative, because people judged you or judge someone else.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. And if you get curious about yourself, which takes slowing down, that's why I talk about that. We can't
Okay.
get curious about ourselves if we don't give ourselves a moment's peace. We can only
Yeah.
get curious about ourselves if we just say, okay, just slow down a little bit. Let me notice myself a bit more.
Yeah.
How you interact with your friends. Are you buying your friends presents? Are you always the one that's keeping in touch with them? Are you always the one that's making the arrangement? What is that for you? Why is it important for you? What matters about always making an appointment, calling, staying in contact? That's another value.
Yeah. I can second that, having my
Yeah.
heart issues recently and having to slow down. It's like
Yeah.
there's a unusual consequence, and then actually starting to see things that I valued, but I kind of missed because of always in the fast lane. I think you really have something very strong there that you're sharing. So
Yeah.
just moving us into last kind of segment on the podcast, cultivating self-awareness in life. So what would you advise parents, curators, mentors who want to develop self-awareness in young people? What would you advise them?
Well, you know what? My biggest advice, actually for anyone, not just young people, but for anyone, is to make it really small. Tiny,
Okay.
tiny, tiny steps. Tiny
Okay.
steps. Because, we often think, I need to do half an hour, I need to do, an
Yeah.
hour, I don't have time. I have not done it that way after
Yeah.
the coaching. I actually decided that, every morning I sit with myself for a couple of minutes and I doodle. As you know, I doodle myself.
Yeah.
I
Oh yeah.
doodle what's in emotions going on
Anybody
there
want
for
to
me.
know any brilliant at doodling?
Yeah. That's been something I've been practicing for like 2 years as a kind of how to say it? Yeah, as a kind of a connecting myself moment, to say what's going on.
Yeah.
And the doodling is the kind of processing of what's going on. So
Yeah.
I would say keep it really small. Just start with saying, okay, have a cup of tea. And when you have a cup of tea, just ask yourself, what's going on today? How am I feeling? What's this sense of in my chest? Or why is my shoulder aching so much? Or why am I irritated today? So you
Yeah.
can, it's about opening yourself up slowly, 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 and
Yeah. Like a
revealing
flower.
to yourself. Hmm?
Like a flower that
That's it,
opens up
yeah.
slowly. Yeah.
Yeah. In my mind, it's like exactly like that. You reveal yourself to yourself. It's a bit like you said, you miss things, you have values, but actually we go along going, they're my values, but are we touching them?
Mm.
So I would say for anybody, small moments matter. Walking the dog, walking to the bus stop, say hello to your feet, say notice your legs. I had some somatic coach training before I started my course. I noticed my feet really well, but I actually didn't notice my legs. So I
Mm.
decided to work on my legs a bit more as well as my feet and created a
Yeah.
kind of double awareness, actually. So for me, I realized as a coach, if people can just take some time for themselves to notice who they are, what's going on, why they're feeling sad, why they're feeling happy, it's both sides.
Yeah.
Start there and everything and show yourself some compassion. If it was a friend sitting opposite me and they said, I'm feeling really sad, you say, oh, I'm so sorry. What's
Yeah.
going on? It's okay to feel sad. What's happening there? How about saying that to yourself? It might feel a bit strange, but how about just going, it's okay. Your teenage daughter or son, oof, it's okay to find it a lot. It's
Yeah.
okay. As a teenager, not worrying about everything you have to do, or as a young adult, all the stress. It's okay. It's okay. Sit down. It's okay. And let's
Mm.
just sit with that. Just sit with it. Don't pushing it away is the
Yeah.
worst thing you can do because then you make it tighter. It's like when you have the rubber bands which are really floppy
Yeah.
on their own, and then you
Yeah.
make a ball of it, and you can't
Yeah.
even mold it into a shape anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, so every emotion, every sense we're feeling is one rubber band. If we keep tying them in a knot and a ball, it becomes a solid thing in ourselves. So let's play with the rubber bands and keep the flexibility and acknowledge these emotions that are going on every day for ourselves in small ways, sharing, and just even, talking to somebody else, having a chat with a mate, someone you like, someone you feel safe with. That is brilliant for just giving a little bit of happiness back to yourself. You can't underestimate what a little chat does, actually. And so I would keep it low key. My whole thing when I started the college was I saw the bar of mindfulness, and it was so high that I just thought, woof, let's just make it possible. Let's just make it possible. And just possible. Let's make it about peace and not pressure. Let's make it about, and for me then, small moments, sitting with yourself, being aware, being kind, owning the sadness and go, I'm feeling really sad and I don't know why. And not knowing why is okay, but once you acknowledge it and say hello to that why, that sadness, then it starts to go. And it's really a somatic thing to actually start saying, hello, I feel you, I'm here. And then it starts to go away. And that's amazing.
I love that peace, not pressure. I think that's a great statement. So as we can sort of round up, the podcast, and we kind of come into a conclusion, how would you summarize, sort of what a takeaway around the relevance of self-awareness for young people? How would you summarize it up? What would you like to say?
I have had really brilliant feedback. I got one yesterday from a really lovely student. Summary for them was that I had a metaphor, because me, John, I have loads of metaphors. I said there's always a why. So searching for the why. So we have this emotion and then we just have the why. So if we look a little bit further, and I said, look under the leaves. I was in a forest in this metaphor. It's like under the leaves is so much more, isn't there? There's insects, there's a whole world under there. And I had this sense of, looking under there and sitting with that, being aware of maybe the roots of it. What that does, he said, is the fact he's looked under the leaves, and for this particular person, there was this need to show boundaries. But it's the fact he's slowed down, done little bits, been more mindful. He's had the confidence. It gave him the confidence to realize I can say yes and I can say no. Because by slowing down, he became more aware of, why am I saying yes when I don't want to? So the slowing down created an awareness. And at the beginning, I mentioned that actually before you create awareness, you've got to slow down so you get to know yourself a bit better. We get to know what our default is. And we get to know, why are we offering to make tea for everybody when, we don't want to? What is going on? So I would say that slowing down a little bit, don't get me wrong, it's not like sitting in a yoga position for an hour. Creating this self-awareness, acting from your values and strengths, and knowing also what makes you go in flow, what delights you. It's from there, isn't it, that we can say yes to things and no to things. We can make better choices. Slowing down, I love this. This is something that, I learned also in this. I did found about the I don't know mindset, which I've shared with you before. But the I don't know mind philosophy is, once you slow down, you're able to adopt this and adopt this I don't know mind mentality. That opens you up a bit more, makes you more curious, and it allows you to maybe take more paths that you normally wouldn't take when you're bombing along. When you're bombing along, you're on a motorway, but take the country lane, get off and have a little bit of a country trip, and see what that experience brings. Because on this fast lane of going forward, you have to question, what are you really experiencing there? And there's that famous saying that it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. I
Yeah.
would say by slowing down, that journey just gets richer because you're aware of yourself in the journey.
Yeah.
It's only then you're aware of yourself in the journey. Otherwise, it's about, you're not even aware that you're doing all of that.
Yeah.
So
That's wonderful. I mean,
yeah,
that's resonating with me. I mean, as you talk there, you know, and you've spoken for all of this, Annie. It seems like to me you've given this new younger generation a set of awareness, but also a set of resources to how they can start to interact with their life, whatever comes at them, and then to be able then to, you know, perceive it, then actionize it in a way that gives them a greater control. It's really quite wonderful. I love that session. Well, you know, we are coming up to the end of the podcast. So
yes,
those of you out there that are interested in Annie, let me just say again, like, if you want to talk with Annie and you want to connect with her, you can contact Annie, and it's all one word. So Annie's website is theseriousofa.com. Say it again, one word, theseriousofa.com. And you can contact Annie Petrell there, and you can then, you know, sort of find awareness, self-awareness. So Annie, with that, we will stop the recording and we'll close out. And thank you for a wonderful, insightful 45 minutes. So
thank you. I really loved it.